terrible panic among the ranks of the armed forces of Ukraine, which Zelensky is trying to cover up with his triumphant statements. The only truth here is that the Russians have come back for what is theirs and are methodically dismantling, piece by piece, the defense of the Ukrainian army, in a direction that is also very important, but nevertheless, one of the least talked about. Today, we're going to see what strategy the Russians are using more and more, and further ahead in the direction of Siversk-Liman advances. However, with a very bittersweet feeling, because here, once again, terrible crimes have been committed by the armed forces of Ukraine, which we will discuss at the very end of this video. We start, as usual, from the beginning. It's been quite a while since we last discussed the latest news from the Ukrainian front. We're back here directly from Donbass, from the scene itself, with contributions made by the military of the Russian Federation. And before, well, we were talking about international news, which I think we should all pay at least a little bit of attention to. Of course, I'm talking about what's happening right now in the Gaza Strip, and there you have the report I recently made about it. We owe it to those civilians with humanity. And today, we'll also talk about other civilians, this time from Ukraine. You might say Russian, but actually of Ukrainian origin, whom Ukraine has attacked. Yes, once again, its own people. Let's take it step by step. First of all, Volodymyr Zelensky, who is now having a really hard time because of what Israel is doing in the Gaza Strip. Not because of the civilians, let no one be mistaken, but because the more attention the United States pays to the issue, the less attention Ukraine will end up receiving. Everything will probably be limited. Well, those photos of the First Ladies, like what just happened during Donald Trump's recent visit to the United Kingdom, dressed in yellow and blue. But exactly how much money, which is the only thing Zelensky cares about, will that translate into? Of course, he keeps talking about how everything at the front is going on with total, absolute normality. The Ukrainian army is holding its positions. Of course, it's a lie, and one lie after another. Since even in the directions where the Russian army really wasn't present, in these last few months, at least in terms of significant advances, now the situation has picked up again, and a lot. We are talking very specifically about the Siversk-Liman. From here, the troops of the Russian Federation had to leave in 2022, just as they had to leave other important locations, such as Kherson. This was where, on one of my trips to Donbass, I spoke with civilians who were fleeing from the Ukrainian army, which was pursuing them after previously labeling them as pro-Russian collaborators. Here you have this report as a preview of the crime we're going to discuss today. But in terms of strategic methodical advances, they haven't been very significant. And this is what explains why this is one of the least discussed fronts, perhaps by analysts. The Russian Federation is using here what we could call the layered strategy. First of all, of course, once again, it surrounds the town in question and tries to advance from all three flanks at the same time. Are you seeing it on the map? But besides that, it divides the area into a kind of small pieces, which is exactly what the puff pastry reminds us of once it's done. And with these small advances, it manages to secure itself, to penetrate into enemy territory. And above all, it tries to make these advances mainly along the flanks. It creates a very, very, very strong pressure on those three flanks at the same time, and then it practically advances straight through the middle. That's how, for example, the capture of the town of Avdiivka happened. The Russian Federation troops are trying to use the same strategy right now in the city of Pokrovsk. Also, and this direction is no exception. In terms of territorial advances, it's true that they are quite modest. We're talking about around 15 square kilometers in the last few days. 15 kilometers is not that much. But this has an extremely significant detail, which I would say changes absolutely everything. What Russia is trying to do through this constant pressure is not only to allow its own troops to advance much more quickly and efficiently in other directions on the front, but it's also trying to move forward little by little. Yes, but by controlling, at least through fire control, the main roads. And now we're talking about the main roads that lead to Iman, the place where those refugees I interviewed were coming from. In fact, one of the most important advances of the Russian army right now is precisely that just a few hours ago, they brought under their fire control the last solid road that remained leading to the town of Iman. This, of course, will tremendously complicate Ukrainian logistics. As it is, Ukraine is already losing dozens of its military vehicles on those roads. Now they will most likely multiply, but not only that. Through these small advances near Iman, the Russian Federation has also managed to control, once again through fire control, the very important Slavyansk-Zhum road, without cutting which it is impossible to continue advancing toward the Slavyansk and Kramatorsk area. In this sense, of course, I must remind you that this front, the Siversk-Liman front, or the Seversk pocket, as we can also call it, forms the northern flank of that area. Very important advances, but with a bittersweet feeling, because it is precisely here, on this front, particularly in the town of Shandrigulova, where the armed forces of the Russian Federation have encountered a terrible and atrocious crime committed by the Ukrainian army. I can't show you the full images, only some screenshots. I will share the images themselves, as usual, on my Telegram channel. Liu Sivaya or at Liu Sivaya. In this one, there are 2 Ukrainian soldiers, 2 Russian soldiers, 2 Russian soldiers. The Russian soldiers have tried to negotiate with him. In fact, they themselves say this, to negotiate with him and offer him a chance to escape and let him get away. But first he had to let the hostages go. He pushed them onto the street. All this happened inside a house. He ended up pushing them out onto the street and opened fire in bursts, immediately wounding a soldier of the Russian Federation. Both the woman and the child tried to escape. The Russian soldiers who were at the scene helped the child. They were able to rescue him and take him to safety in a house. He was running when he was attacked by a Ukrainian drone. Yes, once again Ukraine has ended up attacking its own civilians. Russian soldiers. 2 Russian soldiers, in particular, went to the scene to try to help her when another drone approached them. They genuinely thought that what it wanted was to attack them, so they moved away to lure it and save the woman. But what it did left everyone absolutely frozen. It attacked the civilian. I understand that it killed her. This is very hard to watch. It's very hard to talk about. And yet, it constitutes the terrible reality that is being fought against every day on the Ukrainian front. A reality that will hardly appear in Western media, so I think it's my duty that at least it shows up in these reports. I hope you understand, and thank you. Thank you for being here one more day.